I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce, and this is The Radical Center, a recording project I began in 2022 as a way to describe and discuss the social and ideological currents that are rapidly altering our culture. In a time when political polarization seems to be the norm, I'm seeking to understand rather than react. I'm grateful to all the thoughtful men and women who share their stories and insights with me in this conversation series. If you would like to contribute to this project financially, there are links in the description. Thank you, and thank you all for listening and being part of this exploration. Today I'm speaking with Laura Howe, and Laura, you're a UK counselor, and you wrote to me not long ago letting me know that you'd watched a couple of the videos that I'd done and saying that you'd been really dismayed by how radicalized the field has become. I'm super interested in your story and your perspective on this, so thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, me too. So maybe could you start by tell me how you came to be interested in counseling and what you thought you were getting into? What did you think the field was and the profession was when you began that process?
That's such a good question. So I think it came to me out of desperation. I think I didn't have exactly the best kind of childhood. My parents weren't exactly these good enough parents that the counselling field tells you is sort of the ideal starting place. So for me, I think it was a sort of profound interest in what, looking for what normal was, and counselling. I don't know. It just called me as a field that would have me come to understand what healthy was, and to that end, that has actually been, that is what happened. But I guess I got disillusioned with much stuff along the way, for sure. But yes, that's why. That's essentially why I was kind of very interested to learn about psychology, just generally. What constitutes good human health, what's normal, what's abnormal. Just absolutely fascinated from day one.
Mm. And what was what you found when you started the process of studying counseling? Did you find that the perspectives that people had on normal matched what you sort of expected and hoped that they would be, or was there? I'm kind of wondering, when did something start to feel off? Was it right away, or was it later on in the process?
It was, for me, it's been a sort of slow piecing together of just information coming to me along the way that just didn't quite fit. I studied, my diploma was in 2000, around the sort of 2010 time. Mm-hmm. And when I think back on a kind of on the kind of this I guess a lot of the stuff that humanity seems to be arguing about at the moment, the kind of social justice stuff, there wasn't that much. I remember there was a bit. I remember watching a long video about basically the color of your skin, and the kind of basic theme was that if you are white, you have absolutely no idea how awful the world is if you are not. And I think that was something of a shock to me. It's not something that I'd considered before. And then but I don't remember being completely, that didn't worry me too much. But on reflection, looking back, I guess that was the start of it. But I think there wasn't too much I think your experience was a lot more exaggerated than mine by the sounds of it. But for me, I think the thing that kind of had me most interested in terms of what was going, that there might be some sinister theme. For me, it was the pharmaceuticals. It was the medicalization of normal human experiences, and how the field that I was in seemed to be in some way in cahoots with the pharmaceutical companies, and that what I saw from my beginning, because the beginning of my career was in rehab, it was in addiction treatment. And what I saw was that things like methadone didn't work. I remember I had a caseload of sort of 90 people, and I had that particular role for about 2 years, and not one person ever stopped using heroin and cocaine. So I just, that was the beginning. And then I saw how, people would come to me and they'd been prescribed antidepressants for sometimes 20 years, and they weren't well, but they weren't, these pills weren't working yet that's what was being offered, and I think unethically. So for me, that was the big sort of light on. It was like, well, if they're okay to promote these things, then what else might we be promoting that is not exactly good advice? And the other thing to mention, I think, is that I'm a fiercely independent gal. I mean, I just always have been, ever since I was a little girl. I've never liked being told what to do. I like to make up my own mind about things. And I just got this growing sense as a counsellor that you were being shoehorned into to agreeing with things that you might feel passionately against. And that didn't sit well at all with me. So I kind of exited the registering bodies. That's what we call them here. I'm not quite sure what that, because it's a different system in the States, isn't it? But here, as a therapist, you kind of, it's advised that you're registered with these governing bodies who kind of, they feel like this big, dark enterprise that sort of sits on top of all of the counsellors, and all, as far as I can see, it looks like all the counsellors are just desperately trying not to get into trouble. Yeah. And I just didn't want to be part of that. It just felt so it felt like there was something, what's the right word? I can't think of the right word. There is a right word. I don't know. It just heavy-handed. It had a dark quality that I just didn't like. So I've kind of gone renegade, as anxiety-provoking as that was at the beginning, and I've just kind of developed a private practice and areas of special interest of my own, and I'm free of the restrictions of those governing bodies. I call it, they're like entities, these entities that are telling practitioners what to do and what they should believe and how to behave, and then I should say, of course, COVID came along, and the kind of, the conversation around vaccines and the masking, I couldn't understand how you could insist that a therapist was to sit with most of their face covered. I never ever wore a mask. I had a very strong stance. For me, the minute that thing rolled out, it felt sort of sociopathic. There was something dark about it. And so yes, a series of things that led me to believe that something was not quite right in terms of the field generally. And then I guess more broadly that the culture's gone mad, society's falling to pieces. I don't know if you're aware of the Brett Weinstein. He's got he's got the Dark Horse podcast. He talks about the junkification of everything, and I just love that term. And that's what I saw. That the health advice is killing people. The food is killing people. What we're doing sexually just is beyond crazy. Yeah, I guess I feel I'm enjoying is a kind of independence in my practice whilst watching all of this stuff swirl round. Fascinating.
Yeah, so it sounds like when you went to school in the 2010s, it was, or around, I think you said you finished around 2010.
That's right.
So the racial stuff, the stuff that we call woke, wasn't as intense. There was a little bit of that, but it wasn't nearly what I was encountering by the time I was in school around 2020, 2019.
Not at all.
But then you brought up the pharmaceutical thing, and that's something I think doesn't get addressed enough. And perhaps it's because this woke stuff has eclipsed this as the biggest concern for the field. But
Interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. And so that's something that I've also really been concerned with, is the over-medicalization of the human experience. There's this idea that we heard when I was in graduate school that as a counselor, what you should be doing is working in community mental health. And then that's a place where you'd have caseloads like what you described, these ridiculous high caseloads where you're more of an overseer. How could you really get to know people on a really ongoing and deep basis when you're working with that number of clients? But you're there working with people who are significantly impacted by social and mental health issues. And the worried well was this other category of people that we were supposed to sort of look down on. There was this tone of like the worried well, and that phrase alone is really derogatory. And I thought at the time,
that term.
That was something that was brought up in the program that I was in a couple of times. And I thought, those are the people that I want to be working with. Are there people going through life's developmental challenges? Maybe it's relational challenges or personal stuff that's just coming up and creating a place where we're stuck. And we really could use somebody to talk with and open up and sort of make sense of the things that we're struggling with. Those were the people that I wanted to work with, and they were being called the worried well, and we were being channeled towards this other model, this community mental health model. And at the same time, everything was so medicalized that we were, even in the program, and I've said this a couple of times, when we worked with other students, we were assigned to each other to be each other's sort of counselors in a supervised capacity by the program. One of the things that we were told several times was, if you can't find a diagnosis for this person, talk to your professor and we'll find the appropriate diagnosis. Basically, every single one of us who were presumably high-functioning people, here we are in this applied psychology master's program studying to be the people that help people with their mental health. So presumably we're pretty high-functioning, but we all have a diagnosis in the DSM, the Manual of Mental Disorders. We are all qualified for mental illness diagnosis. And so this idea that everybody walking around is mentally ill, and that's another thing I'm curious to get your take on. I've heard this a couple of times where people will cite statistics that say liberal women have, liberal white women have the highest number of mental disorders. And I think, well, if they're accessing counseling more, the minute they walk in that door, they've got a mental disorder. It's official, because that's what this particular profession is setting out to do. It's diagnosing mental disorders in every single person that walks in the door. Indeed. And so I'm curious for your perspective on that, because I'm glad to hear somebody talking about the problem of over-medicalization.
Well, I remember it when because they brought that book out. I remember it. My tutors were I'm really grateful actually for the tutors that were on my diploma. I remember they had something, they had an independence of spirit about them, and I'm thankful to this day that they were that way. I remember really well that they brought out the DSM. I think it might have been 4. I don't know. It doesn't matter. At that time, they brought it out, and I remember that they were kind of laughing at this manual, saying that basically these disorders were created in boardrooms by businessmen, and I remember they turned to one particular, and to prove their point, that they singled out, it was something like caffeine addiction disorder, and then they read the symptoms of the disorder, and it was just funny, and I remember thinking at that time, goodness gracious me, if this manual's at the heart of the, because I do think it's an industry. First you create the problem, and then you create the solution to the problem. I mean, I just don't see people. I don't see people as a potential disorder. I genuinely do. One of the first things they taught us on the diploma was this idea that human beings we naturally move towards health, that we are self-healing in the same way that our bodies heal when we are injured physically. The psyche does the same thing. We're the same emotionally, and I just remember thinking that was just so hopeful and beautiful, and it's something that has settled deep at the core of me, and so that's what I promote. I don't see my clients as a series of disorders. I'm sure very much like you, I see them as a beautiful expression of existence, and they've all had their unique story, and their treatment should be as unique as they are. And what I don't believe in is putting medications on because these medications, this whole idea of the what do they say? The chemical imbalance of the brain. I always thought that was weird, because it's not like we're scanning brains. Like, well, how do you know that this person is chemically imbalanced? And of course now that's been revealed as not true. And then if you are then treating people with strong chemicals that arguably do create a chemical imbalance, what then are you dealing with? And we don't really know. It seems to me that the doctors don't really know what these drugs do, and lots of people are on more than one drug. They might be on drugs for other, physical conditions. We don't know how they I can't remember what the term is, but how those things cross over. But what I saw was people being made very poorly by these drugs, and not that. What I saw, Leslie, was that people, they were, I don't know what's the right word for it, deadened.
By the antidepressant medications.
Just deadened. And how do you get to the how do you get to the person, to the heart of the person, to the soul of the person, to the person's story, if they're not functioning as meant to be? And I don't know, I just have this sort of deep, I'm angry, to be honest. I feel really angry. And how do you think these medications play out in relationships? If you can't feel properly, if you can't make sense of yourself, I just wonder, what havoc is this playing? If your mum has been on serious psychotropic medication for 10 years, 5 years, 20 years, what has that done to her relationship with you, your relationship with her? And it does. It makes me very angry. And I know why people don't want to talk about it, because I think we're all frightened of what what happens, what could happen. We live in a dreadful cancel culture, things that we should be able to we should be free to discuss. We're not free to discuss. We know that now. So I get why people don't want to talk about it, but we should be.
Absolutely. I'm really intrigued by what you're saying about the pharmaceuticals, by these antidepressants and how they change people and change them for their relationships, change their experience of life, and change other people's experience of them in relationship. And it seems like there were a spate of books and talks that came out in the last several years around birth control, around hormonal birth control, doing things like this, because it alters a woman's natural cycle. And we're naturally meant to phase in and out of different parts of our cycle and find different parts of our personality at those different points. And really be a phasic creature. And this sort of flattens that down to one phase. So you live all of your life in this one version of yourself, which changes who you're attracted to. It changes how you nurture. It changes how you love and connect, and how you experience anger, and all kinds of things about you that really amount to an awful lot of your personality. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more on this topic. Not specifically birth control, but it looks like you know some things about that. You have some familiarity with that, but just what you found in your research on how these medications alter us.
Well, I think because you can't seem to get the information from Google. It's like Google doesn't want us human beings to know certain things. So you have to do your own research, and what I've found is that these medications, when you dig and dig and dig, you find that they cause things. They note things like derealization, depersonalization, emotional stunting. So one of the things that I've come to feel incredibly passionate about is that there is a natural order, that human beings we have evolved exquisitely over time as everybody talks about, are you a sensitive person, or are you, not sensitive? I think, well, of course, we're all incredibly sensitive. We're literally, we are, made of, I don't know how many nerves, huge amounts of nerves. I'm not familiar with the statistics or the figures, sorry, on that, but we are obviously incredibly sensitive beings. So I love it. To me, it seems like this, the best state, if there's an ideal state, it's a natural state. I don't think we're supposed to be zoned out and detuned and turned down. And what I'm not saying is that it isn't difficult to be fully embodied and to grapple with the life forces, the energetic and sensory realities of life. It's incredibly difficult, but that's the task, So I feel really upset about this sort of normalized numbing. It's become, it's normal to be drunk. It's normal to, take over-the-counter medications. So many people. I mean, I don't know what the stats in America are, but the last released government stats in the UK was back in 2016. I don't know if they're reluctant to release the more recent statistics, but back in 2016 in the UK, it was something like 1 in 4 people were taking at least one psychotropic medication. So this was antidepressants, benzodiazepines. I can't remember the details, but it, why this information isn't widespread is baffling to me. And so 1 in 4 people. Nearly 10 years ago, that's 1 in 4 people. They're all driving their cars. They're all. So derealization, depersonalization, emotional, may cause drowsiness. Huge amounts of these regularly doled out medications, they all cause these, basically you diminish the human, you diminish I don't know, the capacity for those individuals to make sense of themselves. They're just not receiving.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, I don't know, it's like everything's turned off.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think, what does that mean for us all? What does that mean for society, for marriages, for families, if a huge amount, a quarter of our population in this country they're not with it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is what we're encouraging, my field. This is what we're saying. This is, in England, they have, I don't watch TV. We got rid of our TV in 2007, which was one of the greatest decisions that we ever made. But they have this poster picture of your pill, cool beans, everybody's medicated now, nothing to be ashamed of. And yeah, so I've developed this sort of fierce, and I think, positive stance that, we don't need your pills, thank you very much. Mm-hmm. We don't want your pornography. I don't want your porn. I don't want your pills. I don't want your junk food. I just think, like, leave us alone. Mm-hmm. So kind of that's how I practice this kind of restorative, serious conversation about how to help, because people come, you must see yourself, Leslie, people come and they are in such dreadful shape now. The combination of the pills and the food and the bad relationship advice, they're so bent out of shape. It's so painful
mm-hmm.
to witness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Do you see any room for medication in mental health treatment at all? Because that 1 in 4 is really, it's a tremendous amount of people, and I don't doubt it. Just with the number of people that I know who are on some kind of ADHD medication or some sort of antidepressant, it's just a ton of people. And I don't doubt that, although it's pretty shocking to think about at least 25% of people walking around medicated just in order to perform daily functions.
Yeah, that's right.
But do you see it as being helpful in any case, or would you just abandon it completely, or are there times when it's helpful?
I mean, I'm not, I'd urge people to, what I'd urge people to consider is that these are serious medications. And I think it's a serious decision to put something in your body that you don't understand. And that's become so normal now. Mm-hmm. So I can't ultimately make the comment, whether there might ever be a case for them. I don't feel confident or comfortable to comment on that. I tell you this, I would never want my little boy to take any of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very well-reasoned and circumspect response. Leaving room for that possibility for somebody to make that choice. Yes, and if I wouldn't
want it for him, and I would always think, no matter what he's going through, there's going to be a beautiful, there's going to be a natural aid. It will, whatever you go through, that it's at least as likely that there's going to be something you could do that would stand no chance of harming you. Mm-hmm. So that feels like that. Yeah, that feels. I feel I'm proud of that answer. That's mm-hmm. the truth. I wouldn't want it for him. So if I wouldn't want it for him, why would I want it for another fellow human being?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good answer. Something you said, and I don't know if I want to retreat from this topic because I think it's so important. I think there's so much more to be said about that. But you said something about the regulatory bodies being like entities that are sitting like an umbrella over the entire profession, the counseling profession, and counselors being terrified of running afoul of this, getting in trouble.
Yeah.
That rings so true to me. I can remember when I was seeing a therapist, this was prior to me going back to graduate school, and I had this really lovely counselor that helped me tremendously. She was wonderful. And I'd been planning on going back to graduate school for counseling during this time. I had left law school, which was my first choice. I got in about halfway through law school. I said, no, this was really not the right path. I should actually go back to school for counseling. That was more my
Good for
calling.
you.
So I left, and then I had a couple of kids and waited a while before I went back and started graduate school. And in that interim time, I was seeing this therapist. And so we talked some about her profession, knowing that this was something I was going towards. She would share some of her experiences with me and give me some advice on that, what to expect, etc. And this very reasonable woman who was careful in her speech faced a number of times during the time that I was working with her were administrative sorts of complaints from people. Like I remember one time it was a client who she had diagnosed the child with something that the parent didn't like. And so what the parent did was go straight to the regulatory body. And then she had to have some sort of a disciplinary hearing. And there were things like this a couple of times for her. And they were really scary for her. She shared a little bit with me about that experience. It was really jarring. And when I was in graduate school, in my ethics class, I can remember so well, my professor talked about all the different ways that you can get in trouble as a counselor. These are this way, this way, this way. It was like the first day was her just presenting a scared straight sort of analysis of all the ways that you can get into trouble. And she said, if you don't like that, then I suggest that you leave this program right now and go become a coach. And so and it really hit home for me because I was already thinking, I'm not sure that this is for me. I didn't want to leave the program immediately. I wanted to continue and finish the entire program. But it was around that time that I decided, no, I think I will be a coach. I think I will not be working as a licensed counselor. And what I've come to think over this time, I speak with newly licensed counselors who are terrified, for instance, of working with an LGBT identified client because they feel like anything that they say that doesn't blanketly affirm whatever's going on with this person, if they even have the whiff of exploring some of the premises that are being laid out with the client, then they may be reported and may lose their license. So I talk with people all the time who are terrified of losing their licenses. And this is, I think, what I think that this really represents is if your counselors are so constrained by a licensing or regulatory body that's an arm of your government, then your counselor is a government agent. You are going to the government to sit and talk about your problems. You're not talking with a person who's giving you their life experience and drawing from their, not giving it to you, but drawing from their life experience and from their education in order to help you one person to another. You're interacting with the government in order to figure out what normal is. And that is, maybe that's an extreme statement, but I find that really disturbing.
And you're wise to find that disturbing, because how can you be authentic when you're frightened? I just they don't go together, do they? How can you're not moving right. You're kind of, I can just imagine that you're kind of, that anxiety would have you so almost robotic, so it just sounds like bullshit to me. You're basically, yes, putting these practitioners into a frozen state, and I don't know. That's just a dreadful state for the whole thing to be in. You can't. I've heard it described as, I don't know if you've heard this term, but cookie cutter therapists, where so they're all saying the same thing, they're all playing it safe, and I just don't think that, and I don't know if you have this phrase in the States, but here it's all about the safe space. As a therapist, you've got to provide a safe space.
I'm allergic to that phrase. I can't stand that phrase.
Isn't it revolting?
Yeah.
So you've got to offer this safe space, and you're a safe person. And I think, well, I'm not a safe person I don't know how to, that sounds dreadful. It's like I'm my own person. And sometimes I disagree with clients. Sometimes I think that the best thing to say to a client is, you're the things that you're doing are perverted. But you can't do that if you can't work authentically if you're so frightened that the person in front of you might complain, and that stands you to lose everything that you've worked for, and not just lose everything that you've worked for, as in lose the ability to practice, but your name will be dragged over. Your name will be. Here you get placed on a list of blacklisted therapists that's public for everybody to see. And I don't know about the procedures there, but it's the client's word against yours. So are we to believe that in the history of therapeutic intervention, no therapist has been the victim of a very unwell client's actions? I mean, that's just ridiculous. So yeah, I can completely who in their right mind would want to go through something like that? Who would want that? So yeah, I imagine that everybody's just going along with what do we believe, that boys can be girls? Yep, okay, boys can be girls. Shall we be putting you forward to have your breasts removed next week? It's like, I just what a dreadful state of affairs. So I feel, I talked to my supervisor. She bless her, she sort of refers to me as the one that got away, the one that kind of managed to flee the trap. And but back to the client, because that's who's important here. What do you get if your therapist is ultimately not real? How can you help someone else become who they are if you are? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. And so you're the one that got away. You're renegade, and doing it your own way, independent of the regulatory body. How hard is that to do in the UK?
I think it's almost impossible. I think this is the tragedy, is that they're all stuck, because if you've done counsellor training, that doesn't mean that you can't get yourself known, you can't get yourself seen. So what the therapists rely upon here is something called the counselling directory. You can't go on the counselling directory unless you're being governed by one of these governing bodies. So if you're looking for a counsellor, this is what they'd have you believe, that everybody's going to go through this counselling directory. But the brilliant thing that's changed, of course, is that basically whether you want a kebab or a counsellor, you type in kebab near me or counsellor near me. Okay. So I'm one of the lucky ones in that my husband he's a genius when it comes to I don't even know how to talk about it, because I don't do any of it. He has made my website. He's he's basically got me to the top of Google. So if you Google therapist in Somerset, I'm kind of like, I'm pushing my way past BACP, which is that's like the granddaddy of the governing bodies, you know. So I'm kind of, and it's so fun. Me and my supervisor joke about it all the time, that we have cheated the system, and now, and especially now that we've gone on YouTube, because I'm doing these, you know, we talk huge amounts about, you know, our whole YouTube venture is that we are championing sane, loving marriages, and we've got, so we're that side of the business is really growing. So I'm getting now global clients globally, which is just so much fun. And I've basically just, so I'm sorry, I'm not answering your question. I fear particularly well, but it's hard to do it. You'd have to have so many other skills, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible. You just got to be creative. And I think that it's a tall order. You know, if you graduated 30 years ago, you've got your qualifications, but you don't have any, you know, skills in the tech domain or the IT domain. I think it is hard to get yourself known. It's hard to get your name out there in a way that would see you, you know, as successful as we've managed to be.
So it sounds like most of the challenges are around marketing yourself without that directory,
that's right.
and without that license. So without the license, or whatever it's called over there, the regulation, certification, or whatever that process is of being anointed by the governing body. Without that, are you still able to call yourself a counselor and a therapist, or are you? No,
for
okay.
now.
Okay.
For now.
Okay.
So at the moment, all you need is your qualification. So I think, and you know, you can get your qualification from sort of the courses vary massively at this point in the UK. I mean, I was very careful to go for a course that was accredited by the accrediting bodies, you know, and I really did want to do it the right way. But it seems that if you want to practice and have your soul not compromised too much now, going about it the right way is the wrong way. I mean, what an upside down world we live in.
Absolutely. So I'm really curious about your message on healthy marriages. Do you have a way to sum that up in a sort of a nutshell, I guess? What are we doing wrong, and what could we be doing better, and how do you contrast the vision that you have with what you're seeing generally on the population landscape?
Well, I feel like we've forgotten the basics. You know, I don't it's hard to know what to make of marriages nowadays. I mean, people come to me and they are in a dreadful state. I mean, people don't look after each other. It's like we've forgotten that you know, that there's honor in being a good spouse, you know, that there is dignity in that. You know, if you know, I say to clients all the time, if for a relationship to be fulfilling, you need to have enough of the things you enjoy and not too many of the things that you don't enjoy. You know, I know it's a simple concept, but if you you know, if you don't take care of each other's needs, if you don't show care. I mean, I think that there's, you know, as a therapist, it's you know, the message is clear. You've got an ethical duty to deliver standards of care, but when it comes to marriage now, it's savage. I mean, everybody's, you know, everybody else. What I see is that when couples arrive, they just blame each other. You know, there is almost no self. You know, there's no accountability, no no assumption of responsibility. So it's like watching children bicker. That it's exactly the same. And well, you did that, and they don't listen to each other. They're not interested in each other. And I'm not quite sure. I mean, I think that what's caused that is complex, and we could have a whole other conversation about what's leading to that. And I do think it's cultural. I do think it's the medication. I do think it's what people are watching. I mean, garbage TV, and people tell me, everybody works, so they've got no time for each other, and then they get home at the end of the day and they switch the TV on, and it's very common for a couple to be watching TV and on their phones, so they're I think people are completely dysregulated, and they're completely disconnected from themselves and from each other. And these are not the cornerstones of a fulfilling relationship. So I feel like in some ways I'm not counselling people, I'm parenting. I'm kind of providing these kind of almost structure that it's like people need instruction. You can't watch. Do you know that it's not acceptable to watch pornography? It's like people don't, but everybody does it. Everybody watches porn. Everybody watches TV in the evening. It's like, yeah, that's true, but you're telling me that you want to be fulfilled in your marriage. So that's going to mean radical changes. So that's, I think people just don't know what they're doing, and there's no, nobody's. If you ask people, do you know anyone that's happily married? And nobody does. There's no. And I think that's because there are no, sometimes I think, where have all the grown-ups gone? Where are all the adults? Nobody's got a good role model. Nobody's got anybody to talk to that's going to say, well, the pornography probably hurts your wife. The fact that you drink every evening is probably not good for the state of your marriage. So I feel like that's a part of the problem, is that I think I saw something. I was watching one of your podcasts, and one of your lovely guests said something about the sexual revolution, and how from that point we kind of started living like teenagers. And it just rung so true, and adult, you need to be an adult to create a sane, secure, stable marriage, and that involves mastering the self, doesn't it? You have to get yourself in good order. You have to be, physically well. You have to be sexually well. You have to be psychologically sound. You have to, ideally you've got some kind of spirituality about you. You want to be offering this amazing version of yourself that's really attractive and interesting, and people are not doing that.
Do you see any reason for optimism about the adults coming back?
Well, I'm hoping that it's conversations like this, and that there seems to be a migration, I'm reliably informed, a migration from mainstream media to sort of alternative media. And I think that it takes courageous conversations. People need to have some, you need to talk about these things. I think part of the problem, as science steamed in, and we threw out religion, we kind of stopped having places to go to talk about important aspects of human existence, like marriage and child rearing. So we need to usher something back in. And you're not going to find anything useful watching Love Island or, celebrities go dating. I don't know what people are watching in the States, but here it's just junk. So we kind of need to encourage one another to get serious. I think that part of the problem is that we're not thinking seriously about our behavior. If your marriage is a mess, you are ruining your children's lives, ruining them. And I don't know why that has lost its sacredness. My supervisor talks about the spiritual ghetto. She says you're in the ghetto, Laura. And I just love it as a term. It's like we've taken the sacred's been removed. We don't have this kind of, we've lost this kind of awe in life, and we're not taking care of, because we don't seem to have the same value, that we don't seem to place the same value on things that we used to. My husband is a beautiful man. He's incredibly valuable to me. He is he's been the greatest source of security and stability and that I could have ever wished for. So I treat him as such, and vice versa. And we've forgotten that. And of course, if your parents feel that way about each other, your children know that. There's no security like that. So do I have hope? I mean, I think we're in a dreadfully serious place. I do worry where we're headed as a species if we don't remember that we're supposed to treat each other as though we are incredibly valuable. It's like people don't even like humans anymore. I mean, how has that happened?
Yeah, the plentiful distractions that you mentioned, all of the ways to, and when you said pills, porn, junk food,
Yeah.
and I would add TV to that list, and scrolling
100%.
social media to that list. It's like a perpetual Candyland that people are in.
A dustbin.
So many. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Well, I feel like all the different things we've touched on could spark long conversations, each one.
Absolutely.
And I've really enjoyed speaking with you. And
likewise.
I'm tempted to just draw this out, but I think maybe this is a good place to pause and perhaps talk again another time.
I would love that, Leslie. Nothing would make me happier. It's been an absolute treat to share this space with you. There was a time in my life where I felt so alone. I felt it was sort of the transition from mainstream media to, I kind of turned that off. And I went through a process of sort of looking around me and thinking, like I said earlier, where are the grown-ups? Where are the serious people? Why is no one talking? Nobody wants to talk about serious things. And I just felt so lonely. And it was off the back of COVID that I was so desperate to find people who were asking sensible questions about what was going on. I was so desperate for that it led me to find this sort of podcasting community. And I feel it's been so, I can't do it justice with words. I feel so relieved to know that there are like-minded, soulful, spiritful people out there having conversations, serious, brave conversations about these things that seek to really harm us all. So thank you, sincerely.
Thank you, Laura. It's very heartening to hear the way that you've spoken about some of these issues, and I'm glad that you're doing it. And will you tell people where they can find your YouTube channel and find you online?
Just Laura Howe, laurahowe.com. So laurahowe.com or Laura Howe on YouTube.
Awesome. Okay, I'll put links in the description, and it's
Thank
been
you.
a pleasure to speak with you, Laura.
Likewise.